taxonomy actually, that a natural taxonomy was kind of formed in this process. So some of our competencies were lower on Bloom's taxonomy, but by the time that someone had finished all of these competencies and had earned all 6 of those, and they had earned the generalist, it was a really natural progression to move along through Bloom's taxonomy.
Thanks, Collin. And Sarah, last but not least.
Thank you. I'm going to stick a link in the chat. Hopefully everyone can access that. But this is a snapshot for what we're calling our unified credential framework. Probably like most institutions, there was a lot of enthusiasm around micro-credentials at WGU. And this college wanted to create certificates, and this one wanted to create certifications, and this one wanted to create specializations. And it was like, wow, okay, like let's see if we can get ahead of this before we start flooding our portfolio with things that are similar that we're calling something different, or something different that we're calling something similar. So really trying to get our hands around this before we started to release many of our micro credentials. And so when we took a step back, we started to think about, okay, like what's important to us from a micro credential perspective. And similar to what Collin was just saying, was it's got to have market relevance. You can badge things, till like the end of time, and people are badging things, and not all of them have relevance in the market. And it's one, flooding the market, because now I think there's that study from Credential Engine that says that there's over 1 million different micro credentials in the market. Like, how is anyone going to make any sense of that? Like, of what is a micro credential of value, either as an individual, as I'm making those decisions, or as an employer, if I'm seeing that on somebody's resume? Like, do I care? Do I trust it? Do I know what that means? And so one of the things that we were really trying to address up front was like, I don't know, there's almost like a flow chart, right? Is there relevance in the market? If it's yes, then okay, we'll move forward. If it's a no, we're not going to do it. We don't want to add to the confusion and the noise that's already out there. So tying our micro credentials specifically back to skills and competencies that employers are looking for is our first criteria. And so, and then I think the second big one that might be unique about WGU is that, at least for our initial offerings, everything is validated. Everything has an assessment, and not just an end of course kind of, I take it on my own sort of assessment, but an actual assessment that is validated with integrity and security and validity and all of those good things. And so for us, when we're trying to put micro credentials, out into the market, we want them to be relevant and we want them to be validated. We might look at things in the future, especially around like continuing and professional education, where it is more of a checkbox kind of thing. But right now, we're sticking with validated micro credentials. And so this is our structure, just at a high level. You can kind of sort of see the flow, but we will validate a competency and provide a badge at the competency level. And I think, as the participants were mentioning before, we view a lot of these as being stackable. And it's not just, how do we create micro credentials as standalone micro credentials, but how do we look within our existing, let's say, even degree programs, and identify opportunities to award credit and really be able to celebrate achievements on the whole path to a degree, right? It's not that, I sit in for 4 years and I get this bachelor's degree, and then all of a sudden these amazing skills are bestowed upon me, right? I'm achieving and demonstrating skills like all the way up through my program. So how do we start to capture those and making sure that we are highlighting those, allowing students to represent those, having them understand the value of those so they can start to take advantage of that. earlier in their programs. Like a great example would be software development. We know in IT, project management skills are a big deal. Employers are looking for those. So as I'm going through my software development program, and as I start to achieve a level of competence in project management skills, then we will award that student that badge that they can demonstrate that, and they can start to use that straight away, as opposed to waiting for the gold shiny star at the end. So those are our big, I think, factors in terms of how we were trying to identify this and how we saw these sort of fitting together and really supporting each other in an elegant way.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm gonna go through a few questions that we think are of interest to you, and if you have additional questions, please put them in the chat. First question we'll start with is, as you think about the steps taken to create your badging programs, when in that process did you identify and launch your taxonomy, and why did you do it? Anissa?
Sure, thank you, Sherry. We started with several stakeholders across campus who were already participating in badging in an informal way where it had not been centralized or managed for necessarily common meaning and understanding. And so when we pulled all these individuals together and we mapped out how we were using badges, we realized we needed to create a taxonomy at that time. So right up front, in order to create an inclusive model, we knew we had to develop a taxonomy. So it started at the beginning for us.
I'm sure you're muted.
Sarah, would you like to weigh in?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with Anissa. Like, the sooner the better. It's kind of like, if you don't get this ahead of time, like the cat will be out of the bag and it's hard to pull them back in. Like, it's very difficult to award a certificate to a student, one day that actually is maybe more like a specialization in your new structure. So definitely advocating to get some sort of framework in place before it gets too out ahead of you, and it's hard to rein back in.
Right.
Yeah, I can jump in. So I think what's interesting about how we approached our taxonomy, again, it happened naturally. We started working on the Greater Washington Partnership, and as we were building out those badges, even that meta badge, for like, this is not going to be equal to the other badges that lead up to this, right? And sure, we can add things into the metadata to describe kind of the assessment tools that were in place. We can add great descriptions. But I think it was a natural progression for us to realize we need a better way to be thoughtful about how we want to categorize badges from creation and then to how we issue them.
Right, and Collin, a follow-up is, how has your process evolved, or the taxonomy evolved since you started?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I alluded to it a little bit, but before we started creating those GWP badges, we probably already had somewhere in the neighborhood of 55 to 60 badges in our portfolio. So I think, going back to Sarah and Anissa's point, we actually weren't in that taxonomy space for a long time, probably 5 or 6 years when we were creating those badges. But I think that wasn't without like momentum or anything. It was a good endeavor for us because we really needed to build up excitement on campus about microcredentialing. Why is it important? Why should we do it? Why should we be thoughtful about it? And that was kind of before this kind of concept of where do these badges live and fall and why. But again, that the GWP experience was the kind of crucible aha moment for us of, okay, we need to be more thoughtful moving forward. So the short answer, Sherry, is that the real answer is we're thinking about it now and thinking about how we can create this taxonomy. And again, it's been a great point of where we have been at, but this has been something that we're going to ask ourselves when we are creating new badges. Where in this taxonomy do you fall? And we are positioned to be, we like those attendance badges. And the reason for that is that we're trying to be thoughtful about this comprehensive learner record and giving our learners the agency to say, this experience was valid for me and I want to share that out with other folks. Because recognize that's some of those attending experiences, they're not nothing. You may have gained a competency and you may have a really meaningful experience, and having a badge or a micro-credential attached to that can be really helpful.
Just to follow up, and there's a question in the chat about the Greater Washington Partnership. With regard to those DACO badges, do the pathways accommodate learner movement between institutions? So if a learner starts at one of the other collabs related schools, can they transfer to another school in the partnership and continue on that pathway?
Yeah, that's absolutely part of the mindset we have when we're working on this. So being able to take one of those badges that you've earned, and then if you come into UMBC and you have that badge, everything uses open badges. We use an open badge pathway to be able to do this. So you'll be able to take those badges. And once you have earned those 6 competencies, wherever you have earned those 6 badges from throughout the Capital CoLab institutions, you'll be able to earn that generalist. So yes.
Thanks. I'm going to ask Sarah to also talk about how her taxonomy has evolved. And in doing that, maybe talk about some of the metadata you're capturing and why it's essential in those badges.
Yeah, absolutely. So in creating the framework to begin with, we did a lot of research. I think, unfortunately, we don't have a national standard here, as many countries do. But we did look at what some of the international standards are in other countries to see how they're structuring it. We're also trying to be plugged into other conversations that are happening around trying to get some consensus on what some of these definitions are. Ideally, we'll all start to coalesce a little bit more in the future, because I do think it is confusing to individuals and employers and other faculty members when they have great ideas about different credentials they want to offer. It's hard, and I think we're in a really hard place right now. So we definitely do not feel like our structure is set in stone. But we did create it to be flexible, so that way we can adjust as ideally we do start to move forward in a more consistent direction. So we're definitely, just from a an involvement place, making sure that we're keeping on top of the conversations that are happening, and knowing that we will have to pivot at some point. We're not going to get this right on our first try. So knowing that we have to be flexible and still stay knowledgeable, I think, is our key. As far as metadata, I think the big thing that we're really trying to underscore with our micro credentials, again, is the relevancy to workforce needs. And so all of our badges have skills and competencies as part of that metadata. So that way, I think, as Collin mentioned, making sure that students understand what skills are part of that badge, making sure that they can communicate what skills are part of that credential, and making sure that employers can see that as well. So the skills piece in particular is one of the points of metadata that we're really trying to ensure is there to kind of help those conversations and to be able to make those connection points across education institutions, individuals, and employers.
Thanks, Sarah.
Somebody's got to make sense out of that.
So I'm going to ask you to weigh in on that, Anissa, but as you're considering that, there's a question in the chat that I also want you to roll in, and that's specifically about what are the differences in badges with regards to the taxonomy, and how they communicate it out to stakeholders, and how would student and employers recognize that a particular badge has those different requirements, or as they said, or that blue banner is representing the badge with a distinction in the example that you gave.
Thank you. So we have had quite a few changes as well in our taxonomy as we've moved forward with the initiative. One example is that initially we started with the term ribbon at level 1 badge. And we did that because we wanted at first we wanted the word badge to match what we see at a lot of other institutions, where it's very specific to mastery of a competency and a workforce skill that's been, externally named, possibly by some body or standard. But the community was very resistant to the word ribbon. So, and would push back with our governance group, which is our microcredential committee, which includes faculty and staff across the campus, in every division of the campus participate on the microcredential committee. And the microcredential committee was getting a lot of pushback with these ribbons. By renaming them to badge level 1, that pushback stopped. So the willingness to accept that it was a lower level badge was there, but they were not willing to let go of the word badge as a community. And so it didn't harm the taxonomy itself. We were still able to distinguish between the higher level badge and a lower level badge. So we remain flexible with that. We also started incorporating industry certificates at the badge level 2. Because some of those industry certificates are just a test or an assessment that you sit down for, not necessarily a performance in a real world context. We had to open up that level of badge for industry certificates as well, which initially our taxonomy had, sit down tests, quizzes, exams, not really as performance assessments, and we had moved those into the badge level 1. But we have evolved that as well. As far as how we communicate, we engaged our strategic communications unit. We talked to them about our goals. We want the goals. We want the taxonomy itself to be reflected in the design characteristics of the badges. And so it's very important that every new badge go through a process, not only being reviewed by our microcredential committee, but once approved, then also it goes through a development process that engages our strategic communications team such that they can be sure that the imaging is appropriate and matches that within the taxonomy. And the designs themselves are communicated on our website. We also have links in the badges themselves to learn more about Kennesaw State University's badges, and then as well as our guidebook, which provides a lot of description of our badges. And of course, our students sharing those badges, our learners, that's going to be the best thing that we can do to communicate with employers the value and meaning of these badges.
Thank you, Anissa. Collin, can you weigh in on the governance process, those involved in designing your, not only the visual branding, but also just in working on designing the taxonomy itself?
Sure, yeah. So I think with those GWP badges, again, I think some of that was an external collaboration about how that framework was going to be set up and what made sense. I think we defer a lot to who are the creators of the badge and working with them to be thoughtful about how are they going to align to various frameworks and different taxonomies. Particularly Bloom's is kind of the one to be most thoughtful about with faculty when they're creating co-curricular badges. But I'm also thinking about badges that we are starting to create right now through our Shriver Service Learning Center and through our Center for Democracy and Civic Life, using some larger frameworks, NACE, AAC and U rubrics, value rubrics that help out with those creations of those badges. In terms of the visual branding, we do have a set UMBC badge that we use, and we have some freedoms and liberties to be creative within the parameters of the badge, but most importantly, there's the UMBC branding element to it, and then if there's an office that's associated with that badge, they're usually visually represented as well.
And your new position is one of coordinating these credentials on campus, and what's happening with your governance structure?
Yes, so it is changing. So we're in the process of creating something closer to what Anissa was referencing. So including stakeholders across campus that want to be part of the conversation, not even just creating badges, but folks that have a stake in when we issue badges. So that includes folks like our Career Center, even human resources, because if we're going to be thoughtful about creating microcredentials for faculty and staff professional development, we know that human resources wants to be involved, the registrar's office, different faculty from different colleges. So we are creating a new governance structure to include many stakeholders on campus that will take these applications from faculty and staff to create microcredentials, review them, provide feedback, so that we actually create them in some kind of process.
Thank you. And so, Sarah, do you want to weigh in on any of those topics, the governance, the visual creation?
I'll say once you get a framework in place and you have buy-in from your stakeholders, it makes the creation of credentials after that like that much easier, because if they're following the framework, then they don't have to jump through 100 different hoops to get some sort of approval. So again, I think getting that framework up front really helps enable growth and efficiency, I think, as organizations want to create their own micro credentials. Because if they stay with the framework, then that's an easy process. If they deviate, then it takes a little bit longer to kind of figure out. But it's also helpful as we think about designing credentials, if they know what the structure is, that really supports efficient design as well. And then, of course, marketing and student feedback and things like that for any types of visual branding is important.
Thank you. So we have a question that came into the chat that I'd like for us to address. Are any of you using badging for internal employee growth or pathways for employee growth, professional development, staff and faculty? Anyone want to?
Sure, at Kennesaw, we're doing that as well. So our micro-credential framework, we're using it for earners who are students, community members, faculty, and staff. And so different units, just depending on who they want to propose a micro-credential for, still have to fit within the taxonomy.
I just dropped a link into chat for our example because we're really proud of the work. We recognize a need for more opportunities for faculty development to be thoughtful about creating equitable and inclusive courses, particularly during and post-pandemic for online courses. So we ended up creating a 10-week workshop that had 10 different competencies that if faculty earned 8 or 9 of the 10 competencies, then they were issued the instructor badge. So all of that is along a pathway that we used.
Yeah, and just to add on, same with WGU, we're partnering really close with our people and talent organization to not just align the credentials that we have for internal employees, but also to align the skill expectations. So if we have a data analyst program right in our portfolio, and we say these are the skills that are required for graduation and becoming a data analyst, then we also we want to make sure that aligns with what we're expecting our own data analysts to do at WGU. So we're aligning not just on the credentials in that framework and how we award those, but also on the underlying skills and competencies themselves.
Great. I'd like to go back to that language and terminology topic because we know microcredentials is very new to a lot of people. It's a culture shift for a lot of our institutions. And so that language and terminology can vary from institution to institution, as we heard from Anissa, just based on what people are willing to accept. So who else would like to weigh in on that? How did you educate your community? What were they willing to accept? And who was key in that discussion?
I can start. I think one of the things that's kind of interesting is that, and we found this out through some of the marketing and focus group work that we've done, is we use micro-credentials a lot in like the larger like academic community, but students don't really understand what that means. They look for programs. They like the word program. And so if their program results in a micro-credential, great. If it results in a degree, great. But I do think that there is a disconnect between even how comfortable we feel about using the word micro-credential, and I do think that that's a disconnect with students and what that actually means. It doesn't seem to resonate with them yet, or maybe ever. So I think calling it something, but then also providing that explanation and what that really means on the website is important to make that translation.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think I hear that, and I think that's totally true, Sarah. I think one of the things that we've had a challenge with, are actually with our faculty and being able to call it badge with faculty. And it's probably because of this pre-taxonomy issuance of badges, right? Not being able to understand that we do issue badges for attendance to being able to take that 10-week course and everything in between, and not having the language in place. Now we do, but before we didn't have the language in place to be able to differentiate which badges belonged in which taxonomy and why. So now that we have this kind of infrastructure in place, I think that that will get better in time, but there is still kind of some kind of way about how we feel about the word badge, but we are hearing that faculty like the word microcredential more. It seems more meaningful. It seems like there's more oomph behind what we're doing with that badge itself. But I do want to just throw out, I think that the paper from ACRO earlier this year that just listed out all the definitions has been so meaningful and helpful to be able to just give that to folks and be able to say, these are some shared definitions that we can use across institutions.
Great. So, we just started talking about getting faculty involved in this process. So how are you using badging for specific performance versus seat time? And how do you create more badges within the curricular and academic area and involve faculty in that process? And Anissa, can we start with you?
Sure. So communicating the difference in badges from Carnegie credits has been a little bit of a challenge. We initially saw several proposals come in from faculty that, said when students complete this course, they'll get a badge. And we had to help them see that they were looking for specific student learning outcomes and performances, and tying those badges to those performances that the students were doing in those courses. And then, of course, with that, we wanted to see the assessment instrument as well to be sure that it was in alignment with those learning outcomes or performances. And so part of the microcredential committee's work is to communicate with the faculty back and forth and helping them understand this, as well as our resource materials that we provide. And we also communicate this by speaking with, sorry, a flight just landed. Everyone's walking by very loudly, losing my train of thought. And so repetitive communication is the best way to help faculty have this mind shift from seat time to student performance. And when we ask them what is the evidence of that outcome, that's when we start to be able to move the faculty member towards the understanding that it's about a particular competency and performance of that competency.
Any of our other panelists have something to add about that?
I'll mention, and that was one of the challenges that we were kind of grappling with our credential framework. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we kind of stuck with that these are validated credentials and that they've gone through an assessment process. Part of that is because we're WGU, and as a competency-based institution, that's kind of the core of who we are. And so we felt like that was important, in terms of providing that distinction. Of course, right, and that's the other thing. As soon as you get a framework, you'll have and you're like, yes, this is the best framework for us right now. Like the very next day, you'll get somebody with an idea for a credential that doesn't fit within your framework. So just be ready for that. But part of that was this conversation around seat time, especially as we think about continuing in professional education. Where we are right now, although we're not currently offering any credentials for seat time, conversations that we've had are, let's not call them credentials. Let's call them recognition of, participation or recognition of something, but being very clear, at least, for WGU, that a credential is a validated, set of skills and competencies, and that, that is what a credential is, but recognizing that there might be the need for some sort of recognition for something that might not be validated, but let's not blur the lines and call it a credential. Let's call it something else, like a recognition of some sort of achievement.
Great. And we've been talking about frameworks and competency frameworks and employability skills, right? So do you use competency frameworks? What are some of those, and how do they tie into your taxonomies? What role do they play, and how do they work together? Like, Collin, do you mind leading off of that?
Yeah. So again, I think talking a little bit about those with the AAC and U value rubrics that we've used, and I think the way that we have looked at that is we actually have a number of our faculty and staff that have helped and have co-created some of those rubrics. So that's been great and convenient, but it's interesting because it's almost, we're able to have our experiences inform the rubric, and rubric also inform our experience, and kind of have that symbiotic relationship. So what I mean by that is we're being able to be thoughtful of, oh, we should create this micro-credential, and then we should be able to use this rubric and think about where we can plug that in on campus. So being able to reference some of those national frameworks lets us be thoughtful about what could we or what should we be adding to our portfolio that's not already there, and then being able to draw on existing rubrics for our assessment measurement when we go and evaluate those experiences from our students. So it's helpful to get ideas about micro-credentials that could exist that don't already, and then also how are we going to evaluate those as well.
Anissa?
Sure. So we've also been encouraging our faculty to look at standards of within their profession. For example, in teacher education, there's the International Society for Technology in Teacher Education, ISTE, and they have a set of standards, and we have encouraged those faculty to look where their course assignments align with those standards, and how we might be able to micro-credential those standards of practice in the profession through the coursework. So those are some other places. And then as well, our career services, they're looking at incorporating NACE standards as well, or competencies for micro-credentials. So I think there's, for us, we see all those organizations out there, professional organizations, as possible sources of competencies that have been validated by that professional community.
One of the things that WGU has been doing, and I'll post a link in the chat for it in just a second, but we've been doing a ton of work around skills and ensuring that our programs are aligning to the skills and competencies that employers are looking for. And as part of that work, we've been leveraging organizations like, I think it's Lightcast now, but MC Burning Glass, you know, when they were separate and together, and as well as different hiring managers to help inform our skills taxonomies. One of the things that we've done, and we've got over 16,000 skills in our library, but we've gone through and we've matched every credential in our portfolio to skills that align to workforce development needs, as well as aligning them to any frameworks that exist in the industry. So whether that's NACE or whether that's NICE or even ONET and things like that, or any kind of accreditation and licensure requirements. So putting all of the metadata tagging behind each of those skills as well. So that way we've got the link between credentials and competencies and skills and market alignment. We do have many of our libraries that we're releasing and just allowing, oh, thank you, Noah, as part of you know, the work that we've been doing. And so, but it's a heavy lift, but we're definitely happy to share the work that we've done around skills and making those alignments to different frameworks and industry relevant data sources.
Great. And I just should mention that One Ed Tech also has the CASE network, which has collected a list of competency frameworks. So if you're interested in looking at those, hopefully Kelly will be able to provide the link to that in the chat as we continue.
And
we're going to be
like one more thing about like the industry piece, like the other part that I think is interesting and you know, shouldn't be underestimated is that there's a lot of really great certifications, especially if you're thinking about IT, that are already in existence, that already have incredible market relevancy. Employers are looking for those. You'll see them on job descriptions. And so to the extent that, I mean, not every credential has to be something that you create yourself, right? So one of the things that we've done at WGU is, as we're developing our degree programs, we look and see if there are any valuable industry credentials that already exist, that instead of creating like our own assessment for at the end of the course, we just leverage that third-party certification. And so, and that not only allows our students to graduate with a degree, but they're also graduating with a whole pocket full of certifications that have real value in the market as well. And so I think as you're looking through or trying to think through, different micro-credentialing, options, especially as you're considering what micro-credentials might already be embedded in, degree programs or larger programs that you already have. Think about leveraging some of those third-party certificates as well. They're really well done. There's very high security. There's a lot of validity, integrity behind many of those, and they hold real value in the market. So that's, and whether that's even like PMI for project management, there's a lot of good ones out there. So thinking about how those might potentially fit into your programs, could be a big win for students as well.
Great. And I think this question that's just posted in the chat is asking really about how you award these different credentials. What platforms are you all currently using?
At Kennesaw, we're using Badger for awarding the micro-credentials, or I should say Canvas credentials. I think their name recently changed. But also for the review process, we have mimicked our curriculum review cycle with the proposal process of new badges. So we're using Curriculog for proposing new badges. And then we have we're using Accolog for a living inventory, such that should we ever discontinue a badge, we still have documentation in a permanent place that we have awarded such a badge. So we're using several different platforms to get to that point, but Canvas credentialing is the primary awarding.
Thanks. Sarah?
Also at WGU, we're leveraging Badger or Canvas or whatever these things evolve into. But the other piece that we're working on, and I see Dimitri kind of mentioned some work in here as well, is really trying to pull together a lot of the open source standards in creating a learning and employment record that is learner owned, and that is leveraging a lot of open source tools to make that happen. So that's one of the areas that we're moving in as well.
We are a Badger Canvas credential institution now as well. And the biggest reason why we adopted Badger Canvas credential, that's going to take a minute to get used to that one. The reason why we adopted Badger was because of the pathway model. We knew that we were going to be growing, particularly with the GWP, how many of those generalist badges we were going to issue, and we wanted them to be auto-issued as soon as someone had earned those 6 competencies. And we just found it easiest for us to be able to do that along a Badger pathway. And I think Anissa mentioned a really interesting point about where do these credentials live should we no longer want to have one particular platform. And I think that that's an amazing and excellent question, and we're still working that out ourselves. We're trying to be thoughtful about how we put these in our data warehouse. So how we get the credentials that we create out of Badger and into something that lives on campus for us.
Great. We've got about 10 minutes left. I want to urge our participants to put any last-minute questions they might want to answer it in the chat. And as they're doing that, I'm going to go around and ask, what tips or lessons learned might you share with attendees today? Things you wish you had known before you got it started on your paths that you're on. And also, if you give a sense of what year your program started, so people can see, how long it's taken to get to where you are now. And whoever wants to start, how about Collin? Since you
Sure.
just talked.
Yeah, so, we started our badging initiative in 2015. And here we are 7 years later, with about 70, actually we're at over 100 plus. We just ran the numbers the other day. We have over 100 badges in our portfolio right now. And I hope what you're hearing from the UMBC story that differs a little bit from Anissa and Sarah is that we have naturally grown into a place of needing a taxonomy. We did not begin with saying that we needed a taxonomy. And I'm not saying one is better, or one's right, or what's wrong. And I hope what you're hearing is that eventually you're going to have to be thinking about a taxonomy. I think what I'm excited about now that we're in this phase is that we are positioned to co-create these definitions on campus. What does it mean for us at UMBC, having conversations internally about what are the taxonomies that we want to have for our UMBC badges? And I think that that's a really exciting thing because we can build up even more momentum than we already have, gain more buy-in from the people that should be creating these badges and issuing them. So I think it's been a journey and the journey's not over, and we're going to keep revising and revising, but that's what's great about badges and microcredentialing. We can come out with version 2s and version 3s and be able to share that out when we go to create and issue these.
Thanks, Collin. Anissa? And you're muted.
Thank you. So we started our initiative in 2020. In that year, we awarded 28 microcredentials. And this past year, Brendan can put the exact number in the chat if he's available. We just calculated this, but I believe it was almost 2,000 microcredentials this year. So it's growing very quickly at Kennesaw State. But our approach was not to start with a menu of competencies that we were going to address first. We mimicked very much our curriculum process in a traditional university where the faculty own the curriculum, and the faculty and the staff own these microcredentials in a similar way, and it's reviewed by a committee. And I think one of the things that we need to continue to work on is defining and planning and resourcing the human time that it takes for this distributive model of credentialing, right? Historically, at traditional institution, the registrar's office goes through this work of validating the credential and then awarding that credential. And we have humans devoted to awarding degrees and certificates in that space. But when we move that to the departments, to the staff, we have to recognize the work and value the work, the human effort that goes into, assessing the student performances, awarding the credentials, attaching the the metadata, making sure that everything is there such that the quality is what we expect. And so I think that's something that we will continue to investigate and plan around.
Great, Sarah?
Again, I'll just put in another plug for relevancy and transparency, especially as it relates to skills and competencies. We're seeing micro-credentials emerge as the opportunity to provide more equity and to be able to really open up pathways to opportunity for individuals that might not be ready or in a place to take on a full degree program, or just might not make sense for them. But we can't take what we've been doing with degree programs and just push that all down to micro-credentials and think that because it's not as expensive or not as big of a time commitment that it's okay. There has to be the return on investment. Candidates or individuals need to understand what it is that they're buying, what it is that they're going to get from that, what the value is for that. They need to be able to understand how to communicate the value of the micro-credentials they're achieving. And it's going to be harder for micro-credentials than it is going to be for a degree, right? There is a general understanding, right, of what a degree is, right or wrong, right? But those are what you see all over job descriptions because it's a proxy for a lot of different things. When you get to micro-credentials, it's going to be much more important to have that value and the transparency there, or else it's going to be meaningless because an individual is not going to be able to do anything with it and an employer is not going to look for it, and they're not going to even know what it means. And so I would say that, first and foremost, making sure that the credentials that we provide have that value, and that you're transparent about the value, and that we show students, what this means and what this is going to look like, and how this might translate into an opportunity or not. But I think we can't just have the same mistakes we've done with degree programs and just push them down to micro-credentials, because that's just going to be a big mess for everyone.
And what you're talking about here makes me want to just ask you a couple questions. One, how's your Career Center playing in this, since there's this important tie to employers and employability? Is there a specific group that's working with the Career Center? Are you working directly with them? Are they then working with the employers to help bridge that gap?
Yes, yes, and yes. We have a great partnership with the Career Center, because not only it's that translation piece, right? And it's regardless of whether you're getting a micro-credential or a degree, but how do we really empower our students to be able to talk about that in a meaningful way, right? If you think about, my favorite example is like college algebra, right? If you ask a student like, okay, you just took college algebra, what did you learn? They're like, I learned math. And you're like, okay, yeah, you probably learned math, but you also learn critical thinking, communicating with data, problem solving, like all of these really important skills that you do see on job descriptions and that you do see are important to employers. So how do you start to pull those pieces out of those credentials, whatever size of a credential they are, to make sure that students have that language and that piece so they can translate that of what they've actually learned and the skills that they've had, because they don't understand it. Like if you and I are asked to say what skills we have, I don't know if I could do it, right? Like we don't think like that. And so how do we help our students be able to kind of pull that out and to be able to have those conversations with employers, so that way they can, really take advantage of those skills and competencies that they're learning. And so that's a key piece that we're working on with the Career Center, is that transparency, and how do you have those conversations about value and really let students use it, right? That's what they came for. So make sure they're getting full advantage of that.
Yeah, Anissa?
Yes, we've partnered with our career services office as well, and Krista Fry is actually on the call. She's very much our partner in this work, and she even chairs the microcredential committee. Part of the microcredentials review process is to review for relevance to the workforce, and her expertise is vital in that space.
Great. And Collin, you want to wrap this up, and this will be closing us down. So you're going to have the ability to drop the mic if you can do it well here.
No pressure at all. I would just say plus ones all around. We have an amazing relationship with our career services, and also being thought partners in what's missing. What can we add based on their conversations that they have with other employers, even if it's just kind of in passing, just like having employers be able to communicate with them. Hey, we could really use some UMBC students that have X. Do you know where we can find them? And that really generates some ideas for us to be thoughtful about. Well, do we have a badge for that? And if we don't, let's get started on it.
Thank you. This has been an amazing roundtable. I want to thank Anissa for being outside of Southwest, giving them a great commercial in the background as she's getting ready to board a plane to come to Denver. Sarah, thank you for your time and attention as well. And Collin, we'll see you in Denver in a couple days too. So I'm going to turn this back over to Kelly. She may have some closing announcements. And thank you all for spending the time with us this morning.
Yeah, and I would just say thank you as well. And thank you, Sherry, for being willing to moderate this great conversation. There was lots of thank yous in the chat and appreciation for the resources that you guys shared. So thank you very much. If you're interested, we do these monthly roundtables. So we will have another one in late November. Details are being finalized, but we will send you a follow-up email with the recording. I apologize for the late start to the recording, as well as the slides. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you joining us and having this conversation. So thank you, everyone.